Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Just a friendly reminder that it's helpful to have your curriculum, facilitator packet, and participant packet available so you can follow along as we walk through today's session. Let's jump in. By now, you are pros at the opening rhythm, checking in about homework, briefly reviewing last week's session, and then breaking into pairs to share highs and lows using the 3 listening questions. I want to gently encourage you not to skip these parts, even when they start to feel repetitive. The repetition in this curriculum is intentional and plays an important role in healing. Trauma often disrupts a person's sense of safety, predictability, and trust. These familiar opening rhythms, doing the same things in the same order each week, quietly help rebuild those foundations. They help participants' bodies settle before moving into deeper work, even if no one says that out loud. These early moments also act as an emotional warm-up. People don't always arrive ready to engage. The check-in, review, and paired sharing help participants arrive not just physically but emotionally, so they're more present and steady for what comes next. It's also worth remembering that while the structure feels familiar to you as facilitators, it may still be doing new work for participants. Each week they are practicing skills many people have never had modeled, paying attention to what's happening inside, listening without fixing, and being heard with care. So even when it feels simple, trust that these opening pieces are doing quiet and important work. They create continuity, safety, and readiness for everything else in the session. As you open space for group sharing today, remember there is one more week after this session. Be mindful of pacing so that everyone who wants to share has an opportunity by the end of next week. Invite someone to share a difficult event they want space to talk about, and remind the group that sharing is always optional and always on their terms. Keep sharing contained to about 5 minutes. Hold the familiar listening posture and support regulation as needed. After the share, thank the participant and help them return to the present by asking how their body feels and what emotions they notice now. Next, transition into deep breathing and then move into the story of Joseph. We'll return to the familiar rhythm, hearing the story once all the way through, and then a second time with pauses, using the feelings chart to notice what comes up while inside the story. It's best to listen to the audio file before class so you're familiar with the pacing and the questions. After the story, you'll move into an activity focused on hope, not as positive thinking or optimism, but as something quieter and more durable. In trauma care, hope is the ability to take a step forward even when the outcome is uncertain. Invite participants to spread out in the room and find a place where they can stand without distraction. Encourage them to close their eyes if that feels comfortable and take a slow breath in and out. Give the room a few moments to settle. Briefly explain that this exercise helps people notice how both hopelessness and hope show up in the body, not just in thoughts. Trauma often teaches the body to brace for disappointment or danger. This hope exercise gently interrupts that pattern, not by forcing belief, but by creating a different physical experience. Invite participants to bring to mind a situation where hope feels difficult, something unresolved, uncertain, or painful. Emphasize that they don't need to analyze it or explain it to anyone. Simply noticing is enough. Give them time to settle on a situation. Guide them to notice what happens in their bodies. Trauma responses often appear first as physical sensations: tightness, heaviness, shallow breathing, or fatigue. Naming these sensations helps participants stay present without becoming overwhelmed. Next, invite them to imagine that this struggle has a weight, something heavy they've been carrying. Ask them to notice where they feel it in their bodies. Seeing the weight as something they carry helps the body recognize that it is not who they are. Invite them to name a single word that captures what this feels like. Keeping it to one word helps contain the experience. Then, slowly introduce the comforting words. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to give you a hope and a future. Remind participants that hope can exist even when circumstances haven't changed. Like Joseph, hope was present long before his situation improved. It didn't come from proof, it came from trust. Pause and allow the words to settle. Next, invite participants to imagine hope existing somewhere ahead of them. It doesn't need to be clear or detailed. In trauma recovery, hope often begins as a direction rather than a strong feeling. Ask them to imagine what a hopeful outcome might look like. Not perfection, but peace, restoration, or movement forward. Explain that you'll invite them to take a step forward. The body learns through action. This step isn't about certainty, it's about choice. Invite them to take one small step forward. After the step, guide them to notice what shifts, physically or emotionally. Hope often changes posture, breathing, or internal energy before it becomes a clear belief. Return to the image of the weight. Invite them to imagine holding it in their hands, reinforcing that the burden is something they have been carrying, not something that defines them. Next, invite them to imagine their nurturer or protector standing in front of them. Ask them to hand the weight over and notice what happens in their bodies. This reinforces an important healing truth. Suffering does not need to be carried alone. Allowing help internally, relationally, and spiritually is something many people have to learn. Invite them to take one more step forward, this time without the weight. Name that this step may represent peace, healing, trust, or simply not being alone anymore. Give space for noticing, then gently bring the group back together. For reflection, remind participants that they don't need to share details, only what the experience itself was like. You can ask questions such as, what was it like to take the first step forward? Did anything shift when you handed over the weight? How did hearing the promise of hope and a future affect you? What does this teach us about choosing hope without having all the answers? As the discussion winds down, reinforce that hope is not about guarantees. It's about choosing to move forward one step at a time, trusting that God is still at work even when the story isn't finished. For homework, participants will use the page titled "If I Had Hope." This invites reflection on a situation where they feel stuck, discouraged, or uncertain. Name clearly that this is not about forcing hope or coming up with positive answers. Instead, it gently explores what might shift, posture, perspective, or choices if hope were present, even in small ways. The questions slow the process and help participants practice flexibility and openness, which are important parts of resilience. They'll also continue green light activities, choosing 2 per day. Encourage consistency over completeness. Familiar regulation practices help keep the body steady while reflecting on difficult or unresolved areas. Before closing, open space for homework questions and confirm next week's meeting details. Close with a short prayer, thanking God for meeting us even in uncertainty and for reminding us that hope is possible even when circumstances remain hard. As you close session 7, take a moment to recognize the season you're in as facilitators. The group is now deep, familiar, and tender. The trust that exists didn't happen by accident. It grew through your consistency and care. As you move towards the final week, remember that your role is not to create breakthroughs or tie everything together neatly, but to walk faithfully and protect space for hope to grow in its own time. Thank you for leading with such care. I'll see you next week as we step into the final session together.